With the zombie army wreaking havoc, the heavily guarded CDC has fallen. The survivors had to go to the next military base for protection. When they arrived at the highway, they found the situation. There are many abandoned cars parked here. Must be blocked here when the end times come. This is when there is a problem with the cooling system of the RV, and the repair will definitely take some time. They can also take this opportunity to search for something useful. T-Dog and Daryl were responsible for extracting the gasoline from the car. Carol also found some nice clothes that her husband would not allow her to wear before. Shane also found a load of mineral water, an important commodity in a post-apocalyptic world. Glenn, who was fixing the car, was happy as a child. At this point, Rick spots a zombie in the distance with his sniper rifle. He wanted to shoot it, but another one appeared in the scope. He was about to shoot when Dale, on the car's roof, saw the scene. It was a swarm of zombies. Dale was on the car's roof and didn't dare to make a sound. Rick naturally also saw it and hurriedly crouched down to avoid being discovered. Rick could only run to the back as fast as he could and told everyone to hide. Lori pulled Carol under the car and hid. Carl and Sophia also got under the car. Shane also noticed at this point and pulled Glenn under the car. The zombies soon came towards the car. They just have to make no noise and wait for them to pass. But Andrea in the car was still concentrating on assembling her pistol and didn't notice what was happening outside. But soon, she finally sensed that something was wrong and turned her head to take a look, which directly made her scalp tingle, and she hurriedly crouched down. Rick, under the car, also instructed his wife not to be nervous or make a sound. The only one who did not hide is T-Dog. His size is difficult to fit under the car, but at this time, his arm artery was cut open, and he did not dare to make a sound even if it hurt, so he could only find a place to hide. The zombie has come up next to Rick and the others. Carl was very nervous. Rick, on the other side, could only signal his son to relax. The good thing is that although the two children are nervous, but also did not make a sound, at this time, a zombie came up in the RV. Andrea hurriedly grabbed the unassembled pistol and hid it in the toilet. She has no experience in killing zombies, but the more nervous she was, the more likely she was to make a mistake, and the parts fell on the floor. The zombie heard the sound and immediately attacked towards the toilet. She was so scared that she put her feet against the door. Dale on the roof of the car naturally heard the commotion. He threw the screwdriver in his hand down. When the zombie broke through the door, she gathered the courage to stab the zombie directly through the head. In the early days of the post-apocalyptic world, the job of killing zombies was usually done by men. Andrea had killed a zombie. Her heart could not be at peace for a long time, and T-Dog had yet to find a place to hide. The wound on his arm had not been treated. He had lost a lot of blood, and his brain had developed some vertigo. He couldn't run anymore, and a zombie was already heading toward him. At this time, Daryl arrived and used his bow and arrow to sneak up on the zombie. T-Dog had been stunned into unconsciousness. Daryl had to use the zombie's corpse to cover him and then cover himself with a corpse, hoping this could hide from the zombies. Soon, the zombie herd has come here. Is it life or death? They can only leave it to fate. About 10 minutes later, the zombie army had gone far away. Daryl picked up T-Dog. Rick also breathed out a sigh of relief. Carl smiled up at him, but Sophia inadvertently called out, which also attracted the attention of the zombies who did not keep up with the zombie army. Sophia could only cry and move to the other side. Lori covered Carol's mouth with a deadly grip. Rick was desperate to save the child. Sophia, in desperation, ran out of the road guardrail towards the direction of the forest. Rick was also the first to rush out without considering his safety. Others found no more zombies and also rushed to gather. Sophia ran all the way, with the zombies in hot pursuit. I don't know how long she ran. She fell to the ground. When she got up, she ran straight into Rick's arms. A terrified Sophia tells him to hurry up and shoot them, but Rick told him that he couldn't shoot now. Otherwise, there would be no way to escape if the zombies came from the highway. He could only hurry to carry Sophia and run away. Then they came to the river. Rick told her to hide here. First, he would lead the zombies to other places. With his current strength, dealing with two zombies at the same time, he couldn't care less about Sophia. Rick calmed her fears and told her that if he didn't come back, she would go back to the road the same way she came. Soon the zombies arrived here. Rick deliberately provoked them and then lured them to another place. After running for 10 minutes, he hid behind a tree and used a rock to smash directly into the first zombie, then the second. But surprisingly, Sophia was gone. The others didn't see her on the road. Rick told the story of the situation and was met with Shane's mockery. Rick didn't retort. He just wanted to find Sophia as soon as possible. The four followed Daryl in his search, as he is an expert inside the jungle. Finally, they follow the trail and find this place. In his analysis, Sophia was, of course, perhaps frightened by what she saw. Rick then decided to continue his search with Daryl while Shane and Glenn returned to the road to calm them down. The two of them keep searching along the north, and to their surprise, there are zombies here. It looks like Sophia's fate is in jeopardy. They kill the zombie. Daryl grabbed a long knife and stabbed it in the stomach. The two resisted nausea and turned out the flesh from the zombie's stomach. Looking at the shape of the meat, the zombie must have eaten a groundhog. Fortunately, it was not the missing Sophia. By late afternoon, Carol was standing helplessly by the side of the highway, finally waiting for Rick and Daryl to return. But unfortunately they could not find her daughter. Daryl said it was too late and dangerous, and they would continue the search in the morning. Carol blamed Rick for leaving her daughter in the middle of nowhere. Rick could only comfort her and tell her not to worry and said he had a plan to track her down. Carol, being a bit overwhelmed as a mother, began to blame Rick again for leaving her there alone in the first place and then leaving alone. Rick had to tell the situation again, saying that he had to lure away the zombies to ensure the child's safety. Carol questioned Rick, so small, how to return the child himself, as if it was all Rick's fault. He was not angry and said he had tried his best. The atmosphere at the scene was strained. They understood the heartache of a mother. The next day, everyone gathered around, each with a cold weapon, and went to the woods again to look for Sophia. Even Carl wanted to join the search for his friend. Soon they found a tent. Everyone was praying that the child was inside, but when they opened it, it was just a long dead body. That's when they hear a bell ringing and head in that direction. There was a church here. The crowd quickly ran towards the house, hoping Sophia would be inside, but they opened the door and saw that 3 zombies were sitting inside. Rick and the 3 of them took out their cold weapons and went over. They rarely fight with zombies up close, so many viewers think Rick and their combat power are too weak. After all, the post-apocalyptic period requires experience. Sophia is not here. The bell outside rang again, and it turned out to be a timed horn. Then the group agreed to search around. Shane and Lori stayed behind. Since Lori beat him up last time, Shane has deliberately stayed away from the family. Shane was even preparing a new car, ready to leave the group quietly and start a new life. Unexpectedly, Andrea overheard their conversation and knew that Shane wanted to leave alone. She just wanted Shane to take her with him, as far away as possible. She felt that the team had a big problem and was not worth staying. Shane didn't say yes right away. He just said he would think about it. The group then prepares to continue their search for Sophia. Shane asked Daryl to lead the group forward and search for an hour and then return to the road while he and Rick were responsible for searching deeper. Carl also volunteered to follow his dad. Rick and his wife said a brief goodbye and wanted to leave the pistol with Lori, but Lori didn't want Rick to be unarmed, so she refused. Seeing the two excuses, Daryl gave his gun to Lori, claiming that he could use a crossbow, but this action made Andrea very upset, because Dale confiscated her gun because she didn't know how to use it properly. An hour later, Daryl and the others had found nothing and were heading back to the highway, but Carol was not happy about this. Why go back when you haven't found your daughter? Andrea also said grimly, we use a knife and a stick, but some people can use a pistol. Lori also lost her temper and handed her pistol. Lori was fed up with the way Andrea was looking at her. Andrea didn't refuse and took it. Lori sat down, calmed Carol down, and asked her not to blame Rick for the incident. At first, Sophia was chased into the woods by zombies, and Rick didn't hesitate to go after them. Lori said she didn't know who else could chase after him without thinking or making a tough decision as he did, and asked which one could do it better. Everyone was also deep in thought, pondering Lori's words. Lori goes on to say that you are relying on Rick while blaming him for his imperfections. If you think you can go on without him, no one will hold you back or stop you. Carol was a little embarrassed by Lori's words. Rick was always doing his best to help her, even at the risk of his own life. Andrea also gave the pistol back to Lori, and she realized that no one out there has the same kind of heart as Rick. After Lori's words, the team has been united ever since, and Rick's side seems to have heard the movement. Get closer to see. It turns out to be a wild moose. Shane wanted to kill it for dinner, but Carl wanted to see it up close. The two old fathers were also looking at him with relief. Carl came closer and closer, but at this time, No! In a post-apocalyptic world where the medical system collapses, this father runs wildly through the grass with his shot son in his arms. If he doesn't get treatment, he'll die soon. The man leading the way behind him could not run, and he accidentally shot Carl. The man said that further up the road was their farm. There was a doctor at the farm who could treat Carl. Rick held back the soreness in his arms, not daring to lose any time. Half an hour later, he finally arrived at the farm gate, dragging his tired body to tell the story of how Carl was shot and asked them to treat Carl. The older man with white hair was undoubtedly Hershel, who did not ask many questions and asked his daughter to bring out all the medical tools. Everyone in the house started to get busy. Rick's main concern at this moment is whether Carl is still alive. Under the older man's examination, he still had a heartbeat, but it was very faint. Hershel told Rick to go outside and calm down. They would do everything they could to save his son. Rick's mind was completely blank at this point, and the thought of losing his son made this always calm man panic. A few minutes later, Hershel told Rick that Carl's condition was stable for now and that he should be ready for a blood transfusion. The man, whose name is Otis, explained that he was hunting when the bullet went through the elk and struck the boy. Hershel said the elk's body slowed down the bullet, which saved the child's life, but the bullet shattered into 6 pieces, and if he could get the pieces out, he could live. Otis, who fired the gun, was overwhelmed with guilt and talked to his wife like a child about the situation. Next was the operation to remove the fragments. Rick, who was drawing blood next to the bed, looked at his son who was in pain, and he lost his emotions. Hershel told him to be quiet at this point. Rick naturally understood that he could not be emotional. The most important thing is to hurry up a blood transfusion. After a while, Carl fainted from the pain, but only a fragment was removed. Hershel then said he was out of danger for the time being, but he still needed to get the other bullet fragments out. The bad thing is that the blood vessels in his abdomen must have been cut by the debris, and he still needs surgery to stitch him up. During this process, he must not move at all. If he does what he just did, it is likely to cut his artery accidentally, and he will be dead within minutes. To operate, he had to be put under anesthesia and unconscious, but he could not breathe on his own and had to go out to find a ventilator to ensure his safety. Otis aside reminded that the nearby hospital was burned by fire. Only the high school infirmary has a ventilator inside, but it was occupied by zombies before. There is no way to get close. Shane volunteered to find the equipment because Rick had to stay behind for a blood transfusion. Otis guiltily said he would go with him. The two then drove to the high school. Daryl and the others are still searching for Sophia in the woods. Andrea was left behind but didn't notice a zombie approaching her. When she saw it, she was so scared that she screamed. The others immediately heard the sound. Andrea stabbed the zombie in the chest with the dagger in her hand, but not only was it useless, but she also tripped and fell to the ground herself. Just as she was about to be killed, a horse came running towards her. Someone saved her. It was Hershel's daughter Maggie. She shouted who Lori was. Maggie said Rick sent her and told Lori to come with her right away. Lori doesn't know what's going on. Maggie rushed to say that Carl had been shot and was still alive. Lori was so upset that all she could think about was Carl. Maggie then proceeded to tell Glenn the location of her family's farm. They then rode out of there, and Daryl and the others returned to the highway and told Dale what happened in the woods. Then several people gathered together for a meeting. We all felt that we shouldn't go on like this. The group was now very scattered, and they should rush to the farm and meet up with Rick and the others. But Carol worries about her daughter. What if she returned? Finally, everyone decided to let Glenn take T-Dog to the farm first, because his arm also needs treatment, and the others stay on the road for another night. Soon, Lori also arrived at the farm, and the couple hugged each other tightly. At this time, only those who have been parents know how they feel at this moment. Lori came into the room and saw Carl. Looking at her son, who was suffering, her heart felt like a knife, and she prayed in Carl's ear that he would wake up soon. Shane and Otis arrived at the high school and took a cautious look inside, where there were at least 50 zombies. Otis tells Shane that the supplies are in the big trailer across the road. Shane took a look, and it was impossible to get through. Waiting until night, Shane carefully opened the front door of the police car and then opened the trunk, from which they took out a few lighting rods. They planned to use this thing to attract the zombies' attention and then sneak into the infirmary. The equipment inside was still there, and the two men followed the list to put all they could use into their backpacks. But when they opened the door and prepared to retreat, the zombies had already returned to their original location. This is a big problem. Two people have been unable to care about days, can only rush to escape. The zombies at once towards them chased the tube too. Otis's size needs to be bigger. It is really hard to run. When they came around the corner, there were also zombies there, so they had to change directions. They just crossed an alley, and there were still zombies waiting for them. By the time they reached the entrance of the school building, there was no way to escape. the zombies in 3 directions gradually surrounded them, and Shane could only break the glass to enter the building and then pull up the security net, but before the two could breathe a sigh of relief, the net could not hold on. The two could only escape towards the upper floors and finally hit on the balcony of the 2nd floor, below which were countless zombies. At the same time, T-Dog and Glenn arrived at the farm, and Maggie at the door greeted them. Glenn immediately showed a shy look and stammered to speak. During the day, he saw Maggie's bold appearance and was smitten. Maggie noticed T-Dog's arm and led them into the house. T-Dog's arm was naturally treated. Fortunately, there are antibiotics here, otherwise, T-Dog will certainly not escape a disaster. Maggie has a very good feeling for the clean-cut Glenn, looking at Glenn's silence, and also takes the initiative to chat with him, and Carl's situation is gradually deteriorating. Rick has been transfused 3 times if they really cannot wait for Shane to return, but also can only risk surgery. At this moment, a large number of zombies surrounded Shane and Otis. Shane wanted to jump out of the window, but Otis said his size could not fit through such a small window. He thought the best way is to let Shane stay here. He jumped down to lure the zombies away, so Shane will have a chance to get out of the window. Otis then handed the medical equipment to Shane. Otis fired 2 shots to attract the zombies' attention and then leaped down, but his weight was too much, and he fell. Good thing Shane shot him to help him escape. Otis also stopped dawdling and attracted the zombies to run in another direction. Shane saw the zombies were gone, breaking the glass. Shane was about to jump down when a zombie grabbed him. In an emergency, he pulled out a pistol and solved the zombie, but he also fell, which directly broke his foot. Shane just hissed twice in pain and immediately grabbed his backpack and prepared to retreat. In his opinion, Otis was in a bad way. The place was full of zombies, so he had to be careful not to make any noise. Luckily, the zombies were stopped by the stadium fence, but soon, he was followed by 3 zombies. Shane leaned against the wire fence with a determined look on his face and was about to finish off the 3 zombies, but then the zombie fell to the ground, and Otis arrived. Shane saw Otis some excitement, did not think he was still alive and did not care to do more communication. The two supported each other towards the direction of their car. They don't know how long the walk was. Shane's legs are painful. He told Otis to hurry up and leave himself alone, but Otis is kind-hearted. How can he do things that abandon his teammates? Shane pulls himself together and asks Otis how many bullets he has left. The simple Otis answered with 4 bullets left. The zombies began to approach again, and the two could only help each other while walking to kill the nearest zombie. Hershel at the farm told Rick that the child was losing more and more blood and couldn't wait for Shane and the others to come back. So they had to force the operation, and it was up to him to live or die. At this moment, Rick seems to hear the sound of a car outside. Thank God they are back. Shane quickly handed them the contents of his backpack. Hershel asks why Otis didn't come back. Shane sadly stated that he did not escape. Hearing this news, Maggie also showed a sad look. Hershel adjusted and asked the crowd not to tell his wife yet. Rick thanked his brother from the bottom of his heart, hugged him tightly, and comforted his emotions. Lori also cast a grateful glance. Shane said there were zombies in every part of the school. They only had 10 rounds left, and he escaped with Otis covering him, but Otis was surrounded by zombies too. The more Shane spoke, the more he choked up and began to break down emotionally. Several people are also infected by his emotions, especially Maggie, who has known Otis since he was a child, and he is a very kind person. At this time, Rick and Lori sat at the door waiting for the results of the operation. They had prayed for Carl countless times. At this time, Hershel came out and told them that the surgery was a success and that Carl's condition had stabilized. Only then did the couple let go of their worries. Rick decided to go with Hershel to tell his wife about Otis' death. Not surprisingly, his wife's entire mental world collapsed when she found out. Lori returns to the room and looks at her son with heartache. Shane walks in at this time, and aside from the fact that Lori is Rick's wife, he wants what's best for Lori and Carl. Lori is very grateful to him and urges him to stay and not leave. At bedtime, Shane gets ready for a good bath. His shoulder is badly bruised, and even a piece of his hair is missing. He thought back to his escape with Otis. He asked Otis, who had 4 rounds left, and the two ran and shot back. One was wounded, one was too big, and it was only a matter of time before the zombies caught up with him. He kept track of the number of shots Otis fired, and when he had fired all 4 rounds, Shane turned to him and said sorry. Shane shot him right in the leg and then went up to take his backpack away from him. Otis yanked on it and wouldn't let go. Otis also pulled on Shane's hair, and Shane could only pummel him like crazy. No surprise, Otis was surrounded by zombies. With his delay, Shane was able to escape. The end of the world is a mirror of human nature. No matter how righteous a person once was, he will reveal his true face. Shane shaved off his hair to forget about it and become a new man. The next morning, Daryl and the others arrived at the farm, and Rick and Hershel's family came out to greet them. Dale asked about Carl's condition, then they paid tribute to Otis, who sacrificed himself to save the boy. Listening to everyone's prayers, Shane was deep in thought, with the scene of their escape coming to mind from time to time. At this time, Hershel offered to let Shane give a speech for Otis. Shane wanted to say no, but Otis's wife said she wanted Shane to tell the story, so she would know that her husband had died for a good cause. Shane had no choice but to recount the scene, and he did so with great emotion, claiming that Otis saved him and Carl and that he was a great man. The people around him could imagine how bad the situation was, but it was all a lie that Shane had made up, and he couldn't have told the truth, or he wouldn't have survived in the crowd. Next, the crowd gathered again. Rick decided to divide the area into groups to search for Sophia, but Hershel said Rick just yesterday took 1,500 milliliters of blood and cannot go out to action. Shane's foot also tries not to overexercise for a month. The remaining suitable for wilderness survival is only Daryl. He is ready to go back to the woods to start looking. Next, Shane proposed the idea of training everyone to use firearms but was opposed by Hershel. He said not to use firearms on his farm. Rick can also understand. After all, it's his territory, and he has to follow his rules. Finally, at the request of the others, Dale was allowed to take a sniper rifle to keep watch. He was an old gunman. Maggie proposed that the search for the medicine inside the city. Rick directly recommended Glenn to accompany her. The guy is fast, or a living map. Daryl was soon ready to go out with a crossbow on his back, and Rick urged him to be careful. Watching Rick treat this place as home, Hershel said they generally do not accept strangers, do not want them to stay here more, wait to find Sophia and Carl's injuries healed, and let them leave. Rick did not say anything more. The sky was the world's end. Where exactly is home? Glenn looked away with a smile on his face, and a bright figure appeared in the shot. Just as he was watching, Lori found the place. She learns that Glenn is going to look for medicine and asks him to help find a special item. At noon, Glenn and Maggie rode into town on horseback, their purpose being this pharmacy. The two of them split up to collect the medicines on the list. Glenn quietly finds what Lori needs, which turns out to be a pregnancy test. Maggie suddenly came up behind him, making him panic. He hurriedly hid this thing and then took a box on the ground by hand. But when he looked down, Glenn was a little embarrassed and blushed. Maggie seemed very open and asked him if he had a girlfriend. In front of her, Glenn immediately denied it, afraid that she misunderstood something. Seeing Glenn's panicked look, Maggie thought he was very cute and then started to take the initiative and kissed Glenn. From this pharmacy, they fell in love completely. On the way back, they were in a different state, talking and laughing all the way, and soon returned to the farm. Glenn gave the stuff to Lori first, and didn't ask much. Late at night, Lori went out alone, avoiding the RV and walking towards the distance until no one else was around. And then she started taking out the pregnancy test. Just as she expected, she was pregnant, but she couldn't be happy, and she didn't dare to tell Rick. Maybe she was worried that the baby would be a burden in the post-apocalyptic world, or perhaps she wasn't even sure if the baby was Rick's or Shane's. The next day, Rick has basically recovered his strength, and again assigns everyone the task of finding Sophia. This time, Shane and Rick went out together to look for Sophia. Rick talks about interesting things that happened before the end of the world, but Shane is not happy, thinking that Rick has sent everyone he can to scour the woods to find a little girl everyone knows is dead. Doesn't Rick understand this? Everyone relies on him, and every decision he makes is extremely difficult. Shane angrily states that Sophia is only worth looking for when she's not dragging everyone down. Shane blamed Rick. If he hadn't done this, everyone would have been on their way to Fort Benning, Carl wouldn't have been shot because of this, and Otis wouldn't have paid the price with his life. Rick also came to a temper, saying that Sophia trusted him a lot at the time, but the results let her down. Rick believed she was still alive and would never give up looking for her. They disagreed and had to part ways. Daryl also secretly rode the farm horse to the creek. This time, he seemed to find something, and when he came to the water's edge and took a closer look, it was Sophia's toy. Daryl hurriedly shouted up, but no response. He could only continue to ride towards the front to explore. This was the first time in so many days he found a clue. While walking, Daryl carefully observed the surrounding and did not notice a poisonous snake on the ground in front of him. The horse was suddenly frightened, maniacally twisted his body, and threw Daryl down. Daryl tumbled down the slope into the creek. Under the heavy impact, he felt like his bones were falling apart. and his crossbow arrow pierced his abdomen. Blood stained the creek water. Daryl returned to the shore with his strong body, then tore his clothes and tightly strangled the wound to avoid losing too much blood. But at this time, there were some loud noises in the woods, probably zombies. Daryl subconsciously tried to get his weapon but found it was missing. He could only salvage it in the water. Next, he returned to the top of the hill with injuries. Each step will be involved in the wound, and he could only grit his teeth, and finally with a strong will to climb to a high place, and then a few steps to reach the road. But here the soil is loose. Daryl again rolled down toward the bottom. This time, he passed out. It took him a long time to open his eyes, and he was met by his brother Dixon. Dixon was mocking the fact that he was dying, becoming a follower of that Rick for a little girl. This is a joke. One day they will abandon you mercilessly. Then Dixon kicked Daryl, urging him to get up. Daryl is now in a trance. He has realized that this brother is his hallucination, not his brother kicking him, but the zombie is biting his feet. He instantly sweated with fear. The zombie did not bite through his shoes. Daryl pushed the zombie down and smashed his head with a stick, but another zombie came not far away. He endured the pain and killed the zombie before he jumped on him. Daryl lay on the ground for a while, feeling he needed to pull himself together. Survival in the wild is his strong point. First, he took off his clothes and strangled his waist, then dissected the squirrel he caught before and started eating it raw to replenish his strength, and finally cut off the zombie's ear to make a necklace, which was his trophy. And then went climbing again with great perseverance, and this time he managed to come up. Inside the farm, Hershel sees them busy in the kitchen and does not understand what they are doing in his heart. Maggie explains to him that Lori and Carol are cooking dinner for them tonight. Hershel tells his daughter they should draw a line in the sand with these people. Hershel then urges his daughter to stay away from Glenn and not to have anything to do with them. Outside the house, Dale just went to carry a bucket of water in time for Andrea to run to the car's roof, saying she didn't want to do laundry anymore and wanted to be part of the patrol with guns. Everyone on the team won't let her hold a gun, thinking she can't use it and that using it indiscriminately will attract zombies. And the more she does, the more she's eager to prove herself. She had just been on sentry duty for a while when she saw a zombie in the distance and shouted to the others. Andrea looked through the binoculars and saw that it was a zombie, and she picked up the sniper rifle to prove herself. The others told her not to shoot, as it would give Hershel a problem, and they rushed toward the zombies with their weapons. Andrea was still defiant and started aiming again. The sunset was blinding, but she was still confident she could hit it. And when Dale told her not to shoot, she told him to get out of the way. At the same time, Rick and several people also came to the zombie, which is not a zombie, but Daryl. Several people are a little surprised. Injured, he walked shakily, the corners of his mouth and blood. Simply a zombie. Daryl was also angry at Rick and said, "This is the third time you have taken a gun to my head." As they heard him speak, a few people were relieved, but suddenly the shot rang out. Daryl fell to the ground. Andrea showed a happy expression. She shot, then her smile stopped, and the sound of gunfire drew the attention of Hershel, who himself did not like Rick and the others using guns. Fortunately, Andrea is a novice. The bullet grazed Daryl's scalp and flew past. So many difficulties he survived, but Andrea almost killed him. Andrea and Dale rushed over. They saw that Daryl was still alive. Andrea was relieved. Glenn also noticed that Daryl had a necklace made of ears hanging from his chest, and Rick pulled it off, which Hershel and the others didn't like. At this point, the man in the back shouted, "This is Sophia's doll." After a while, Hershel helped Daryl to treat the wound. This incident makes him even more reluctant to live with Rick and the others. They are so reckless to survive until now. Andrea also blames herself for the incident and almost makes a big mistake. Dale has always cared for her, and now he's telling her not to think about it. They ate together for the first time during dinner, and the atmosphere was somewhat silent. Hershel didn't want to have much contact with them, and during dinner Maggie secretly passed a note to Glenn, asking him where to go on a date tonight. Glenn looked at Maggie and smiled happily, then immediately wrote down a line on the note. Maggie felt her father looking at her, put away her expression, and secretly took the note. Carol came to Daryl's room with the meal and kissed him on the cheek. Daryl was a little uncomfortable. Carol wanted to tell him that he had done more for Sophia recently than her father had done in his life. Daryl replied with embarrassment that Rick and Shane would have done the same. Carol went on to say that you and they are good people and thank you for everything you've done for my daughter. This was the first time Daryl had the satisfaction of helping others, which was completely different from the life he had lived with his brother. When everyone finished eating, Maggie finally opened the note. which said they agreed to meet at the hayloft tonight. At this time, Glenn had already hugged a blanket and ran to the door of the hayloft, but he did not expect that the hayloft was locked. He could only use the ladder to climb in. Maggie also came out at this time. Looking a bit panicked, Glenn just came to the second floor, with a flashlight ready to find a suitable place, but he gradually smelled a rotten smell inside. He shone his flashlight down and saw dozens of zombies. His girlfriend's farm had dozens of zombies in captivity, and he was so scared that he wanted to run away. But then Maggie also found the place.
You were supposed to see this.
The next day, Glenn still has palpitations. From time to time, he will observe the hay house. He always feels that zombies will break out of the door, but Maggie has repeatedly instructed not to tell Rick and the others about this because the people on the farm think that the people inside are not zombies but sick people and will send people to feed them daily. Glenn is now very difficult. On the one hand, his girlfriend asked him to keep it a secret, and on the other hand, these zombies are very unsafe to be around. Finally, indecisive, he decided to tell the team of elders Dale. For the time being, this old man sees everything very thoroughly. The old-fashioned Dale was a bit surprised to hear that, and find Hershel, claiming that he had heard zombies outside the hayloft. Hershel is a little upset. He doesn't want people calling his family zombies. Despite Dale's description of how dangerous the zombies were in the outside world, Hershel insisted that they merely had a mental illness and that his wife and son were inside the hayloft. Dale is silent, knowing he can't change Hershel's opinion, and suggests he can talk to Rick about it. But Hershel stubbornly said that the hayloft was safe now and told Dale not to tell anyone about it. Dale finally had no choice but to return. Next he found Lori, the kindly old man who said in a soothing way that he knew she was pregnant. Lori also said bluntly that only Glenn knew about it, and she hadn't decided to tell Rick yet. To her surprise, Dale asked directly if it was because of Shane. Lori was shocked. Was it so obvious that she and Shane had been involved in something before? Dale hastened to say that no one else knew. He was just a little suspicious because he had experienced more things. Lori had to explain that she used to think Rick was dead before she accepted Shane. She hesitated to have her because she didn't want the child to be born without good memories and live in a precarious post-apocalyptic world. Dale advised Lori not to think that way, but Lori asked, will she be able to grow up and live a happy life? Dale couldn't speak for a moment. He wanted to talk the young man into doing the right thing, but he was powerless. Glenn looks at Lori as she walks toward him and thinks she's blaming him for telling Dale the secret. But Lori says it's okay and that she shouldn't make it hard for Glenn to keep his secret. Lori wants him to help him go out and find some medicine. Glenn is kind-hearted and agrees immediately. Soon Glenn starts heading to town, but he calls on Maggie anyway. But Maggie is not in a good mood because Glenn promised to keep the herb house a secret but told someone else. And again she states that those are not zombies, but sick family members. They soon arrived at the pharmacy again. Maggie looked at the list of drugs, which turned out to be abortifacients, and then unhappily headed towards the inside cabinets. Just as she looked for them, a zombie across the counter grabbed her hand. Maggie had never had such an experience before and was so scared that she screamed. Glenn heard the scream and immediately rushed up and snapped the zombie's neck. Glenn nervously checked to see if she was bitten and then held her tightly. Just at this time, the zombie actually stood up again. Glenn grabbed a dagger and chopped it directly into his head. The zombie fell. Maggie also had a new understanding of zombies at this time. The neck is broken if this thing is human. How can it still stand up? When they returned to the farm, Maggie furiously took the medicine and found Lori, and then threw it on the ground. Glenn came to the tent and said to Lori that they met a zombie when they were looking for medicine and almost died. That's why Maggie was a little excited. Lori was also guilty and kept apologizing. Glenn then took out another medicine for Lori, which she opened and saw was a prenatal vitamin. Glenn still hoped that Lori would think about it and that she should not make her own decision about whether to have the baby. After Glenn left, Lori chose to take the abortion pill, but she immediately regretted it and ended up spitting it out again. She struggled with whether it was the right thing to do. A few minutes later, Rick arrives at the tent, sees the pills on the table, knows his wife is pregnant, and rushes to find Lori. Rick had an endless amount of anger in his heart, not because his wife didn't want the baby but because she kept this from him. Lori, however, tells Rick that she has already spit out the medicine. Do you really want the child to be born in such a world? A heated argument breaks out, and Lori's emotions crumble. Rick's heart softened, and he told Lori they could protect the child and not deny her a chance to live. Finally, Rick looked at Lori with sincerity and asked her if there was anything else she was hiding from him. Lori was silent for 2 seconds and told him about herself and Shane. Rick nodded. He was not a fool. Maybe he had known before. He didn't accuse Lori or ask who the baby belonged to, but assumed that Lori thought he was dead at the time. Will the relationship between them as a couple deteriorate as a result? This seemingly peaceful and safe grass house, but inside the captivity of dozens of zombies, and the closest Rick's team is unaware of this. Glenn, the only one who knew, decided not to keep quiet.
Barn's full of walkers.
Once this statement, the crowd at dinner immediately looked up at him. All felt some incredible. Then, the group came to the door of the grass house. Shane looked inside, and there were countless zombie figures inside. The grumpy Shane immediately suggested rushing in and killing them all or just leaving. Anyway, the plan to go to Fort Benning had been delayed for a long time. Carol said they couldn't leave. Her daughter hadn't been found yet. Shane adjusted his emotions and then said they should consider another option. Rick knew what he was going to say and immediately stated that they would not leave Sophia behind. Even Daryl, who had always been quiet, came out against him, having just found a clue 2 days before. Shane taunted that he had only found a toy and that Sophia was probably already dead. They immediately started arguing and even tried to fight. It's only because everyone is in the middle of it that they don't get into a fight. Rick decided to take a softer approach. After all, it is someone else's territory. How to do it still has to discuss with Hershel. Shane, a grumpy man who was not convinced, takes out his weapon and tries to kill all the zombies. When the people continue to argue, the zombies in the grass house are attracted by the sound outside, as if they will come out at any time. Because of the exposure of this incident, Maggie was even more angry with Glenn, directly put the egg into Glenn's hat, and then buckled it on his head. Glenn's courtship path is going further and further. Rick also comes to Hershel's house to discuss it. He doesn't want to leave the farm. Life is stable here, and Lori is pregnant, so he wants to help Hershel with the farm and get his advice on cleaning up the zombies. But Hershel doesn't want to talk to him about it. He tells Rick to leave by the end of the week. Rick even used a pleading tone, offering to help him defend the farm, but the stubborn older man still said no, and the two part on bad terms. At this time, Shane has been left outside the grass house. He has to keep an eye on the zombies, which can be related to the safety of all. Rick arrived here. Shane directly asked how the results of the negotiations were. Rick said not to rush. Still negotiating. Shane is very dismissive of the negotiation method. The grass house is so close to their sleeping camp. Either go in and destroy them or get out of here. Rick said he could neither kill the zombies nor leave the place. Shane did not understand. This place was so unsafe. Why should we stay here? The two began to argue because of this.
Okay, Lori's pregnant.
Shane instantly froze and could not say anything at once. Rick said that for the sake of his family, he would fight to stay, but he had to respect the Hershel family. Shane could only force a smile to congratulate him. He didn't know that Rick already knew about him and Lori. Shane also had mixed emotions at this time, and even his fingers were shaking a bit. The baby might even be his. He then quietly found Lori. Shane did not immediately ask about the pregnancy but said that Rick was not suitable for this world, not ideal for the post-apocalyptic way of life. Complaining that it was always himself who protected Lori and Carl while Rick did nothing. It was only after these words were said that Shane said that Rick had told him about your pregnancy. Shane knew why Lori didn't tell him about it because Lori knew it was his baby. Lori bluntly retorted that the baby was Rick's, and even if it were yours, it wouldn't call you dad, ever, and nothing you could do would change that. That kind of talk hurt Shane, but he was sure the baby was his. He changed his mind and had to stay on the farm for Lori and the baby. The zombies in the grass house. He will also do whatever it takes to eradicate these hidden dangers. Meanwhile, Andrea is getting her guns ready to go in search of Sophia. She has recently gotten very close to Shane and even had a relationship. Dale can naturally see that, and he has always been concerned about Andrea and rushed to advise him not to go near Shane, a dangerous person. Dale even suspected that he killed Otis, but now Andrea simply does not listen to what he says. Instead, she and Shane have a common topic. Dale looks at the guns. He strongly supports Rick and does not want to use violence to solve the problem. He wanted to hide these weapons, but at this time, Shane chased after the place and told the older man to hurry up and hand over the guns. He had to go and destroy the zombies in the grass house. Dale takes the gun and tries to get Shane to leave, but the guy who's not afraid to die is directly on top of the gun. Dale knew that he could not scare him, then reluctantly handed the gun to Shane. Shane soon returned with the gun directly to the others, ready to destroy the zombies. Many people on the team are also very much in favor of his method. After all, zombies around who cannot sleep well. Soon, T-Dog cursed an expletive because he saw the disappeared Rick and Hershel. They were catching zombies back. So that's how the zombies in Grass House came to be. Shane was furious and rushed over to the crowd, asking them loudly what this was all about. He then started circling a few people, trying to show the farm that these zombies were not human. Shane fired 2 shots in quick succession, but the zombie remained unaffected. Shane understood that the effect had been achieved, went up and fired a shot at the zombie's head. The people of the farm were stunned. In their minds, this was a public killing. Shane told the crowd that they had taken enough risks for a lost little girl and were tired of living next to a house full of zombies. This is a different world. If we want to live, we have to fight. And we have to fight here. Shane finished his sentence and ran towards the grass house, breaking the door's lock in a few clicks. Everyone immediately alerted, and zombies also began to come out one after another. The crowd could only shoot to kill. The people of the farm looked at this scene with sadness. Although Shane's behavior was very aggressive, his method was simple and effective. Soon, all the zombies that came out were wiped out. The atmosphere in the scene was heavy. At that moment, another zombie came out of the grass house. It was a little girl. No one fired. Everyone froze. The child they have been searching for so long is here. Rick's heart also felt very bad. He had a deep guilt for this child. Sophia walked towards the crowd, but no one was ready to deal with her, even though Shane said she was dead. When he saw her, he felt bad. Rick walked towards Sophia, and although he could not do it, he needed to do such a thing this time. Perhaps Rick, in the indifferent world, is not cold-blooded enough, but it is because of his sense of responsibility that he also lets others trust him and rely on him. The family on the farm saw their loved ones turned into zombies and killed, and the mood was very low. Shane is still questioning them at this moment. Sophia is inside. Why not tell them? The Hershel family is disgusted by all of Shane's behavior, and Hershel once again tells them to leave the farm. Rick also wants to talk to Shane. Shane said it was Hershel's fault for not telling them that Sophia was here, and Daryl almost lost his life because of it. Rick angrily said he would handle the matter properly, but Shane said you would only let us go to the woods to find the little girl. But we all knew she was already dead. The two best buddies are finally at odds over their post-apocalyptic survival philosophy. In the afternoon, the two teams said a prayer to the deceased and said a formal goodbye to their loved ones. Carol, who had lost her child, slowly picked herself up. Before she was just a submissive wife. Later he will become a terrible person in the eyes of others. Soon, something new happened again. Maggie's sister suddenly collapsed because of excessive grief. But no matter how they looked, they couldn't find Hershel. Finally, Maggie guessed that he must be in a bad mood and went to the bar he used to go to before the end of the world. Rick decided to go with Glenn to bring him back. As a leader, he had to take charge, but Lori often doesn't understand him. She needs a husband who is always around, not running around helping everyone, but Rick has no choice. He needs to fight for the future. The two then set off for the town and arrived at their destination in just half an hour. Hershel was in this bar, and he had been drinking here for a long time. Rick told him about the girl's fainting spell, but Hershel said it was useless for him to return. She was mourning her mother. The people at the farm thought that zombies were curable, and Shane showed them the truth, which made Hershel lose hope. Not want to follow Rick and the others back and blame Rick's group for being the bogeyman. Rick is not angry but patiently enlightens the older man to live for his family and to create hope for them. Hershel was persuaded, but at this time, two strangers came in the door. The two sides did not immediately confront each other but instead drank and chatted, sharing their experiences. The group also explained their intentions. They wanted to find a place to settle down in the neighborhood. The man looked at Rick's car and asked Rick if he had a farm. Rick didn't answer. It's pretty stupid to expose your camp in the post-apocalyptic world. He turned his head to look at the fat man urinating and defecating everywhere. It was even more impossible to accept people of such quality. The seated man then asked, "Do you have food and water? Do you have beautiful women? We haven't seen women for a long time." Rick is silent. These people basically don't have any moral bottom line. The man then said, "We still have many brothers. Life is very difficult. Why can't you give us some space? We can share human resources." Rick didn't wait for him to finish. He immediately refused. These two people are not angry, but rather indicate that they are out there experiencing what a lot of things, sometimes taking some special means. It is likely to do something they do not want to do. Even the fat man had begun to break into a rant, claiming he wanted to kill them and take the farm. Rick is kind, but he will not be soft on his enemies. Another man pretended to persuade the fight but was looking for an opportunity to shoot. but Rick had already watched out for him. Hershel also looked at Rick in awe, not knowing what to think, perhaps surprised at his determination to kill or possibly thinking that the farm needs someone to guard it. After killing the man, the three decided to hurry back to avoid a long night's sleep. But at this time, the sound of a car came from outside. They could only stick to the door, not daring to make a sound. The car soon stopped there. It seems that there are at least 3 of them, and they are here to find the 2 men from before. Rick said to get out of here. The 3 men were just about to move when gunshots came from outside. They were immediately on alert. Rick took a look, and there were 3 of them. They were just killing zombies. And then they came toward the bar. They were about to open the door when Glenn blocked the door. The guys outside are also on alert, saying they don't want any trouble. They want to find their teammates. Rick thought twice and said they were dead. The people outside started shooting directly, but did not dare to break in. Rick told Hershel and Glenn to get the hell out of there. Glenn opens the back door and walks out carefully, but someone behind him immediately shoots at him. Hershel hit the enemy with a direct shot. Rick arrived at this time and carefully went up to check on Glenn. Thankfully, he was unharmed. Rick and the others tried to run to the car, but just as they were about to leave, the shots rang out again. Rick looked over according to the sound of gunfire, and it turned out that a man had taken the high ground. That's when another of his associates drove up, but the zombies were already surrounding them. The man upstairs jumped down but fell due to the unstable weight. The man driving the car saw the situation and ran away without him. Rick listened to the man's constant pleas for help. His heart also softened, and he wanted to run over to check. At this time the zombies also surrounded, despite Hershel shooting to cover, but the man who was down before was eaten by the zombies. Hershel and Glenn found Rick. They persuaded Rick should go, but the man who jumped down kept begging not to leave him. Rick couldn't bear to leave him behind, otherwise he would be eaten by the zombies. The 3 were caught up in an argument. Hershel looked and saw that it was impossible to get the leg out and suggested that it would be better to kill him than to have him brutally bitten by the zombies. But Rick still insisted on saving him. Glenn and Hershel had no choice but to hurry up and get this guy out. The man's cries were too loud, and the zombies surrounded him. Glenn can only cover from the outside. Rick was also killing the zombies on the other side. Hershel was using a knife to tear the muscles of the man's legs apart. The zombies are getting closer and closer. The situation is getting more and more critical. Hershel and Glenn have started to give up. Rick had to use the easy way out. The next day, the worried group at the farm is about to go out to look for them when Hershel's car drives back. When they got out of the car, the crowd was relieved. Maggie also crossed over directly to her father and hugged Glenn, but Glenn looked somewhat indifferent and did not respond. Maggie doesn't understand what's wrong with him. Immediately after, the crowd then noticed that there was a person inside the car. The teenager was still saved. Shane looked at him. This guy brought back another burden. Then everyone sat around, and Rick told them what had happened. Andrea also raised the question of what they should do with him. Rick suggested that they take him far away and leave him to his own devices when he heals. Shane disagreed. Letting him go would bring trouble. He already knew about the place. Rick explained that we brought him here blindfolded all the way. Shane still thinks Rick has done a stupid thing. What if his accomplices come looking for him? After the meeting, Maggie finds Glenn and asks him what's wrong. Glenn said that he was in shock from the shooting yesterday and that he couldn't have been like this before. When the bullet hit the wall, all he could think about was Maggie's sad face, so he went into hiding to stay alive. Maggie was very happy to hear his place in his heart, but Glenn thought it was not his normal self. He was too selfish at the time. Andrea also found Shane. She felt that everything Shane did was right, only the way of expression was not easy to accept, and hoped that he could improve the relationship with the group. And Rick returned to the tent also and his wife about the murder. Lori comforted him also to protect the family, not blame themselves. Then Lori and Rick said that Shane thought I was his, and even though the baby in her belly was his, he said you were incapable of protecting us and would get us killed, and he was too dangerous. Rick's mind is also full of anger at this moment. How will he deal with the feud between him and his brother? A car pulled up to the intersection, and Rick and Shane stepped out of the vehicle. Shane was confused as to why he had stopped here. Rick said he wanted to talk to him. Immediately afterwards, he named some of Shane's behaviors. First, it was revealed that Shane had killed Otis to stay alive. Shane doesn't feel guilty. One of the two had to die in that situation. To save Carl, he had no choice. Rick has no reason to accuse him of this. Then Rick said that he already knew about Shane and Lori. Shane didn't think Rick already knew about it and was somewhat ashamed. Shane didn't want to get involved with Rick's wife. but the world was changing so fast, and at that time, in the hospital, soldiers were killing ordinary people, and Shane couldn't take Rick away. Along the way, Shane protected Rick's wife and son, and slowly, they became Shane's motivation to live. Shane said if he had the chance to do it all over again, he wouldn't do it. Listening to Shane's words, Rick was relieved that Shane had the great kindness to him. They went on to check the trunk of the car. The purpose of their trip was to send Randall to a distant place and let him fend for himself. The car drove on for 30 kilometers, and they came to a small town factory. The place looked quiet. Rick and Shane got out of the car to check it out and see if it was safe to leave the boy there. Soon, a zombie appeared inside. Shane was about to shoot it, but Rick stopped him. Sometimes, there's no need to shoot. He made a cut on his finger and smeared the blood on the fence. The blood feed stimulated the zombie to rush over. Rick didn't panic and stuck the knife in his head. Then they came inside and checked. It was indeed very quiet, and there was no danger. They also found a strange phenomenon. The two corpses on the ground did not have bite marks on them but also turned into zombies. It's strange, but it's just not the time to study this. They took Randall out next, left him here, and then they were leaving. Randall panicked and shouted to join them and not leave him behind. Rick didn't budge a bit. They just dropped a dagger and were ready to leave him to his own devices. Randall became even more anxious, stating that he was just normal and had gone to school with Maggie. This statement caused Rick and Shane to stop in their tracks and then turn to look at him. Rick and Shane angrily questioned him at the same time if he and Maggie had gone to school together. Randall said yes, but that Maggie had probably forgotten about him. Then Randall said he also knew Maggie's father, Hershel. He didn't realize the seriousness of the problem at this point. Randall may have known the farm's location before the world's end. The two are now very difficult to do. Shane directly said that Randall knows the location of their farm, and if he returns to the team, the consequences are not well estimated. Shane then shot directly but was stopped by Rick. Rick said angrily could not kill him now. Shane knows Rick is being soft again. Rick then said he would spend the night thinking about what to do with him. Shane yelled directly in anger. He was very dangerous and they had killed Randall's teammates. Would Lori be able to sleep soundly if they took him back, and would Carl be able to sleep comfortably? Shane said Rick's approach was stupid and didn't think Rick could protect Lori and Carl's safety. This comment completely angered Rick, and he wanted to defend his sovereignty. The two brothers just wrestled with each other. They are both police officers, and both have very good fighting skills. Randall took this opportunity to crawl toward the knife. At this point, Shane also had the upper hand. His body was too strong. Shane then went to the car, bent down, and picked up the pistol on the ground. And just as he was about to shoot, Rick stopped him again. He punched Shane so hard that his head was dizzy. Randall on the other side also got the knife and tried to cut the rope on his feet in a great hurry. Rick stopped Shane and says that from now on these things are not up to him. Shane then grabbed the tool in his hand and angrily smashed it toward Rick. He looked at Shane incredulously. The good brother was trying to kill him himself. But at this time, a hand appeared in the window, and there was a zombie inside. Rick easily solved the zombie, but he just breathed a sigh of relief when several more zombies came out of the window. Rick hurriedly covered the corpse on himself. The zombies did not find him, and they forced Shane to chase. Shane stumbled and tried to open the car door to climb up, but the zombies behind him did not give him the opportunity. A zombie also noticed Randall cutting the rope. The moment the zombie pounced on him, he finally untied the rope on his leg, and then he kicked broken off the zombie's arm. The rope on the hand cannot be untied for a while and can only hand first around the front. First, the zombie in front of you to solve it. Rick is still running for his life. He has the same zombie chasing behind him, no weapons in his hands, and he can only rush to find his pistol under the car. Rick just got the pistol and solved the zombie who came over, and then other zombies also jumped up. Rick thought of a way to shoot directly through the mouth of the first zombie. A series of several shots until a bullet shot out. Shane was at his wit's end and had to hide in the bus. Rick also found Randall. At this time, must bring this man back, and cannot let him leave. Rick stood up and saw Shane surrounded by about 10 zombies. Randall persuaded Rick to take this opportunity to escape. Rick also had an evil thought in his mind. With that, he took Randall and left. Shane couldn't believe it when he saw it, and they just left. Rick came outside, took their guns off the guards, and then looked at them and started to think as if remembering the scene when he and Shane worked together. Shane here is about to lose it. Just then, Rick came back in his car. He stuck his head out and fired several shots, shouting at Shane to run to the back door. Shane also no longer hesitated, quickly ran towards the back door, jumped into the car, and then left this dangerous place. Randall is beyond excited. This is just so cool. But Rick looked at him with anger. After they walked a little way, they continued to tie him up and threw him into the trunk. In a post-apocalyptic world, you can't let go of someone who might reveal the team's location, even if it's Randall, who looks like a child. Daryl beat him hard. Under Daryl's cruel tactics, he panicked and said that there were 30 of them in total and that he had joined them to survive but was not in cahoots with them. Daryl's eyes had become fierce. Did not believe what he said. Anger kicked him. Outside the door, the crowd was still waiting for the results of Daryl's interrogation, and they didn't know what to do with the boy. Daryl walked past with blood on his hands. There were 30 of them in total, and they were heavily armed. If they come to the farm, they will definitely pose a threat to them. After hearing Daryl's description, everyone agreed that the group had no moral ground to stand on. Rick thought that Randall was a threat and should not be left behind. Dale, however, was not happy with such a hasty decision and rushed after Rick, advising him not to do so. Rick said he had been thinking about it for a long time, and with the information he had learned from Daryl, everyone acquiesced to this. Dale's heart is good. He thinks Rick cannot just decide the life and death of others. He also does not have the right, and this is just a child. Rick was a little speechless. Making such a decision was also very difficult for him, and at this moment, he did not want to discuss the matter too much. Dale started moral kidnapping directly, asking Rick to think about Carl and how Carl would precede him if he did this. Acting on impulse and without regard for the consequences, Dale asked Rick to give him a day. He wanted to talk to everyone. Rick reluctantly said that he would let everyone gather again at sunset to vote and make a final decision. Next, Dale was ready to find others to convince them. He was the first to find Andrea, but Andrea's attitude was also very clear that the teenager is a danger. It is difficult to let go of a guy who will bring people to kill them. Dale continues to persuade that although it's the end times, it's their choice whether to retain their humanity or not. Andrea didn't want to argue with him. At a time like this, mercy is cruelty to oneself. Dale then finds Daryl. Since seeing Sophia's death, Daryl has become somewhat negative. Believing that the team is no longer united, he wants to mind his own business and doesn't care about Randall's death. Dale found Hershel to canvass again, but Hershel only cared about his missing cow. He said to just let Rick handle these things. They want to survive under the post-apocalyptic world, not to plot against others, but also to prevent others from plotting against them. Finally, Dale found Shane. He disliked Shane's sinister and ruthless nature, and this idea must have been suggested by him. But at this point he wanted to persuade Shane to change his ways. Shane said directly that everyone is now in danger. If people think that the release of Randall will not be okay, he does not have a problem. After a while, Shane came to the house where Randall was being held to change shifts. Randall also heard them talking outside. At this time, there was a sound from above his head, and little Carl was sitting on the roof beam. Randall complimented Carl on his handsome hat as a way to improve their relationship. Carl then lets his guard down and starts to come down from the beam. Randall continued to tempt Carl, saying that their camp was well stocked and that if they let him go, he would take Carl there and care for his family. Carl didn't say anything, and he just approached Randall carefully. The door suddenly opens, and Shane bursts in. He was confused as to why Carl was there and then asked Randall warily what he had said to him. He would not allow any harm to come to Carl and wanted to kill Randall directly. Good and Andrea in the back constantly advised him to calm down. Shane then put away the gun. He pulled Carl out. Carl begged Uncle Shane not to tell his parents about it. Shane taught Carl to stay away from Randall, that he was dangerous. Shane then said he wouldn't tell Rick and told Carl to get out of there. After being reprimanded, Carl went to Sophia's grave and wondered what he was thinking. Carol approached him and said they would be reunited with Sophia in heaven. She didn't expect Carl to say no. Heaven is a lie, and people who believe in it are fools. Carol was baffled. How could a child say such things? Rick found out about this and found Carl and told him to apologize to Carol. Carl was reprimanded twice in a row and was a bit depressed. He returned to Daryl's place and looked at these things curiously, especially the cool motorcycle, and a pistol was found in the storage box of the motorcycle. Carl looked around and found no one there, so he took the pistol and went to the woods. He went to the river, where he saw a zombie. Carl was a little scared, but the zombie seemed trapped in the mud and posed no threat to him. Carl got brave, picked up a stone, and smashed it, but the zombie couldn't move. He suddenly had a crazy idea and ran directly behind the zombie, took out the pistol, and tried to kill him like an adult. But he didn't notice that one of the zombie's feet was already a little loose. At this time, the zombie broke free and lunged directly, grabbing one of Carl's feet. Carl then screamed in fear. broke away and ran towards the farm in fear. By the time he got back, it was late afternoon, and everyone was ready to vote on Randall's life and death. Rick just looked at Carl's pants and asked no more questions. At the meeting, Dale knew the vote was just a formality. No one is for him. They all agree that they should not be soft-hearted. Dale always insisted that he should be given a chance, but the people questioned, "We're already short on supplies, so we can't keep an extra man. If they let him work, they would have to prevent him from escaping, and they might bring back 30 men and kill them all." Dale started preaching to the group again, hoping to change their minds. He didn't think it was right to kill him because of one possible thing that could happen. If they did, there would be no hope for their lives. Shane was speechless. Carol couldn't stand the bickering and offered to abstain from the vote. Dale told her directly that watching indifferently was no different than killing him with his own hands. Finally, the meeting was dissolved in the voice of Dale's opposition. At night, four figures appeared in the dark. It is Rick. Several people. They were about to execute Randall. Shane blindfolded him and told him it would soon be over. Randall understood what was about to happen and his voice began to choke up as he kept begging not to do this. Rick didn't dawdle and raised his gun ready to end his life. At this point, no one noticed Carl walk in, and Rick had a hesitant look.
Do it.
For this moment the scene becomes a little awkward. They certainly cannot do this in front of children. Rick put away the gun. He softened up and let Daryl lock him up. Shane slams the door in anger and leaves the place. The crowd watched Rick come back, and he told everyone that he didn't execute Randall. The crowd is also relieved. They are also very conflicted. No one wants to just kill a person, but do not know what to do. Andrea gets up and prepares to go to Dale and tell him the news, but Dale was about to lose his life this night. Patrolling, Dale found such a scene. The farm's cattle were being eaten alive. When he turned to check, a zombie jumped directly at him. The terrifying sound rang through the sky, and Rick and the others heard it right away. The crowd quickly rushed out with weapons in hand. Dale was still struggling at this time. The zombie also failed to bite him, but his abdomen was torn open alive. The pain made him scream out. Daryl, who was closest to him, finally arrived and knocked the zombie out of the way in one fell swoop, then finished it off with his knife. Daryl looked at Dale's injuries and did not know what to do, shouting to the crowd, when Rick and several people arrived. Looking at Dale's injuries also felt incredible. Dale could not speak at this time. He only felt the pain deep in his bones. Rick was about to organize a rescue when Hershel stopped him and shook his head.
Listen to me. Okay, just listen.
Carl noticed the zombie at this time. It was the same one he had seen during the day. Maybe it was because of himself that he ran out. Thinking of this, Carl got scared and jumped into his mother's arms. Looking at Dale's painful appearance, they decided to give him a final ride. Rick pulled out a pistol and pointed it at Dale's head. He was always doing this himself, watching his teammates leave one by one, perhaps seeing Rick's mood. Daryl took the pistol.
Sorry, brother.
The next day, the group buried Dale in the cemetery and said a prayer. No one can forget this kind old man. If someone on the team were in trouble, Dale would be the first to see through it and try to give him comfort and guidance. Dale's death brought about some changes on the farm. Everyone started to check and repair the fence, scout the area around the farm, and eliminate the scattered zombies roaming around. Winter was approaching, and Hershel accepted Rick's team completely, letting them all move into the house. Rick then assigns everyone a task, and he and Daryl are ready to send Randall further afield to be released. This time he didn't ask Shane to go, but Rick instructed Andrea to keep an eye on Shane when they went out. As the man was too irritable and impulsive, Carl Jr. found Shane, then pulled a pistol from his waist, stating that he took it from Daryl's motorcycle. Shane asked Carl what he was doing with the gun. Carl tangled half a day before saying that Dale was indirectly killed by him. He had seen the zombie and originally wanted to kill Zombie, but he was afraid. If the zombie was killed at the time, Dale would not have died. Shane told Carl not to say that, then handed Carl the gun again and told Carl to carry it for protection. Carl had a shadow of it and said he didn't want to take the gun again. After a while, Lori saw Shane working on the windmill. He was lonely and had no one to help him. She came to Shane and talked about what was on her mind. She had been running away from Shane and Rick, turning him against his brothers and not even knowing whose baby was in his belly. She knew that Shane was very aggrieved to have led them to escape the zombie crisis despite the risk to his own life. Lori was a little emotional when she thought back to that scene. Shane wants to hug him, but he's not qualified to do so now. Lori says Shane has always protected them, but she never said thank you. Even though the relationship has become awkward, Shane is still watching over them. Lori thanked Shane very much. Shane choked up and told Lori she didn't have to say thank you. Lori finally told him she was sorry again. She gave Shane so much hope. And because of Lori's words, Shane's hope was rekindled. At this time Rick was studying with Daryl about going out. Shane drove here, told Rick about Carl and took the pistol out, and advised Rick to talk to his son, but Rick insisted that he should release Randall first. Shane said angrily, "Is Randall more important than Carl?" Rick thought about it and did care very little about his son. Then he found Carl, took out the pistol for Carl to hold, and told him that Dale's death had nothing to do with him, and that you were a grown-up child who had to protect your mother. Carl took over the pistol after his father enlightened him. We real-life parents also need to listen more to their children's ideas, so that they can feel the love of the family. Meanwhile, Shane came to the room where Randall was being held. After hearing Lori's words, he wants to protect and possess Lori again, and the baby in her belly is his. He had to eliminate all the dangerous elements and immediately slapped himself on the head and made up his mind, pulling out a pistol to kill Randall. But at this time, he seemed to see something. He pulled Randall away to see the boy had been breaking free from the handcuffs. Shane laughed, and a plan came to his mind. After a while, T-Dog was ready to take Randall out but opened the door and found that he had disappeared, leaving only the handcuffs with blood stains.
Hell no!
Shane, by now, has taken Randall to the woods. He tricks Randall, saying he will take him away from here, and wants to join Randall's team. Upon hearing this, Randall stopped being afraid and claimed that Shane would do well with them, and then led Shane towards the front and walked away from the farm. They came behind a large tree, followed by a muffled scream, and then came out only Shane. What happened is self-evident. At this time Shane even towards the trunk of the tree and crashed over. I have to say, this is a ruthless person. He hit his head bleeding and did not even say much. At this time, the people of the farm also found that Randall had disappeared. Shane hid and watched, then turned around and buried his pistol. With 2 deep breaths, he was about to start his show, then ran out and shouted for Rick.
Rick!
What happened?
He's armed! He's got my gun!
Shane lies to Rick that Randall has taken his weapon and attacked him. Rick rushes everyone back into the house and calls out to Daryl and Glenn to track him down. Shane again took a gun from T-Dog for protection, and the 4 of them went into the woods. Shane kept guiding them forward, but Daryl, good at tracking himself, didn't see any traces. Shane again suggested that Glenn and Daryl team up, and he and Rick team up and do different searches. Daryl raised his questions. The kid was weak. How could he have attacked you? Shane, however, says that a rock can take down anyone. Rick interrupted their argument and agreed to search in groups.
Glenn, start heading up the right flank. Me and Shane will take the left. Remember.
Throughout the night, Glenn and Daryl were still searching and soon found a tree with blood on it and signs of someone walking on the ground and saw a blindfold. While they were studying it, there was a noise behind them, and they immediately got ready. At this time a figure was coming in their direction. Glenn took a flashlight and shone it over. Randall had turned into a zombie. He immediately froze and was pushed to the ground by the zombie. Daryl's bow also misses, and he is pounced on by the zombie instead. Glenn immediately rushed up to help and took out the zombie with a slash. The 2 men adjusted their breathing, and Daryl began to look for clues on his body. But the strange thing is, they searched his body but found no signs of zombie bites. So how did he become a zombie? The only cause of death was a broken neck. The 2 men looked at each other. How was this possible? It simply did not make sense. On the other hand, Shane guided Rick to an open area. Rick was a police officer before the end of the world. Plus he knows Shane's character. This matter is certainly not what he said. Shane had already put his hand on the pistol and then stopped while talking. Rick understood something, stopped, and then put the pistol into the gun pouch.
So this is where you plan to do it?
He had already guessed that Shane had come here to kill him, but he didn't panic, but theorized with Shane, hoping he would come around. But Shane told Rick that he would go back and tell them that Randall had shot you, that he had rushed over and snapped his neck, and that Lori and Carl would drop you. With that, he raised the gun in his hand. Rick gets closer and closer and asks him what the hell he's doing all this for. You dominate my wife and want my children to call you father. Is that what you want? The 2 brothers confronted each other. and Shane voiced his grievances, shouting that I was a better father than you and a better man to be with Lori. Because I'm better than you, I can fight whenever and wherever I want, and you will only chatter there, and your resurrection from the dead has ruined it all. Rick just looked at him so calmly. Shane went on to say that your wife had lost her virginity, and your son was weak. After hearing his words, Rick really wanted to kill him, but still raised his hands, took out the pistol, and slowly handed it to Shane. He told Shane to calm down, put down the gun, let's pretend nothing happened, and go back together to Lori's side. Shane also relaxed his guard at this time and reached out to pick up the pistol. The knife went straight into Shane's chest. Rick angrily yelled at him, "You made me do it. You ruined our friendship. It's all your fault." Rick pulled out the knife. His emotions crumbled. His good brother protected his wife and son but possessed Lori. Now Sean also repeatedly forced himself. He can only fight back. Shane struggled for a few seconds and did not breathe. Rick, however, burst into tears. After a while, Rick calmed down. When he looked up, he found Carl standing there, looking at him at some point. Rick had mixed feelings, so he went over and tried to explain to Carl. Carl was in disbelief and raised the gun in his hand.
No.
Shane behind Rick surprisingly stood up. He has turned into a zombie. Carl saw it, but Rick only wanted to explain it to his son.
It seems, please.
Rick was a little confused about how Shane turned into a zombie and then went up to check. Carl shoots and kills a zombie for the first time, or his own Uncle Shane. His feelings are a bit complicated, but what the hell is going on here? Not bitten by a zombie can also become a zombie? A helicopter flew over the post-apocalyptic city, and the zombies chased after it as if they had seen the target. In this way, this small zombie swarm went from day to night and night to day. The zombie swarm was also gradually growing and finally formed an unimaginable wave of corpses. They came to an isolated farm at this time. The first guardrail could not withstand their crush. As mentioned in the last episode, Rick killed his best buddy Shane and then prepared to take Carl back to the house, unaware that the zombies in the dark had been attracted by the sound of gunfire. At this time, Glenn and Daryl also returned to the house. They found that Rick had yet to return. Lori is worried about Rick's safety and wants Daryl to help him go out and look for him. Daryl just walked out of the house. The scene outside is simply unbelievable when there is such a large group of zombies near the farm. And Rick was about to stop and say something to Carl, but also immediately noticed something was wrong. He took his son and hurriedly evacuated, then ran all the way towards the hayloft. With zombies all around, Hershel told everyone to turn off the lights and get their weapons ready to defend themselves. Such a horde of zombies is enough to crush the house directly. At this time, Lori realized that Carl had disappeared. She didn't know that Rick and Carl had made it to the hayloft, then secured the door shut, and the zombies outside surrounded them. Rick surveyed the surroundings and came up with an idea. They spread gasoline on the ground and told Carl to hold the light and wait for his orders. He knocked hard on the door, trying to keep some of the zombies here and take the pressure off the others. He opened the door, and the zombies immediately swarmed in. Carl received his father's order and threw the lighter down directly, and immediately the hayloft burst into flames. But even if the zombies were eliminated, it would only be a drop in the bucket. Daryl and the others didn't want to give up on the farm either, so they moved towards the second fence. They tried to kill the approaching zombies, and if there were too many, they could still escape in time, but there were too many zombies. He could only move quickly. He also noticed that the hayloft was on fire and guessed that Rick must have done it. Then let the others drive the RV over to check. Rick saw the car after also shouting, "Let him drive here to meet them." After the car stopped, Rick rushed to pull his son to climb to the roof of the car, but unexpectedly, the guy wanted to prepare to pick up Rick. The zombie broke open the door of the RV directly. He was killed directly. The death was extremely gruesome. Taking advantage of this effort, Rick has gotten out of the car from the back, using a pistol to kill the approaching zombies, opening up a road before letting Carl get out of the vehicle. More and more zombies towards the hillside house, and how to kill them is impossible to eliminate, and the zombies are too scattered, simply cannot draw zombies, which will only be a waste of bullets. Hershel took a shotgun to protect his farm. The women in the house decided to evacuate, but Lori searched the house and couldn't find Carl. At this moment, she is anxious, but Carol guesses that Carl is probably with Rick, and they can only see their son if they stay alive. Lori thought it made sense and was ready to evacuate. She shouted for Hershel, but the gunfire was so intense that he couldn't hear her. The 4 women stopped caring about him and started running in the direction of the woods. But at that moment, 3 zombies pounced on Otis' wife, and it was clear that she was not going to survive. Now is not the time to grieve, so Lori tells the girl to let go. The zombies also quickly surrounded Otis' wife. Carol runs off course, and 2 zombies come after her. At that moment, T-Dog arrives in his car. Andrea immediately came out to cover them. She also saw the situation Carol was facing and took care of the 2 zombies with 2 shots. Just as she breathed a sigh of relief, a zombie approached behind her. Carol screamed in fear. T-Dog saw the scene and thought Andrea was dead. Plus, the zombies surrounded his car, so he had to drive away. When Andrea pushed the body away, she found the car had already gone. Maggie drove the car to go back to find her father, but there were zombies everywhere inside. They soon blocked the car's way. Glenn had no choice but to tell her to get off the farm. The older man, Hershel, is still stubbornly shooting to guard his house. When he was changing bullets, there were already zombies behind him. Luckily, Rick came to his rescue just in time. He rushed to ask Lori and the others where they went. Hershel said he didn't know what was going on either. Now was not the time to stay. Rick pulled him and started to evacuate. There was still a car available, and they fled the area in it, but Andrea was yelling after them. Unfortunately, she missed the car again, and with the zombies surrounding her, she had to find a way to escape first. The good thing is that there are still weapons bags on the ground that they left behind. Daryl was watching the fire outside the farm, not knowing what to think. At this time, a woman's scream came. Daryl rushed over on his bike. It turns out to be an exhausted Carol, and the 2 of them managed to escape from the zombies. Rick took Hershel away from the farm, the old man in the car, to see his life lived in the home destroyed, but also some sadness. Maybe Rick and the others are right. There is no safe place in the post-apocalyptic world. By morning, Rick's car had arrived where Sophia had been lost before. The supplies that were once left for her are still here. Carl was clamoring for his father to find his mother, but Rick thought that if everyone escaped, there was a good chance they would come here to meet up. By noon, occasional zombies were passing by, but no one else came here. Hershel suggested that Rick take his son to a safe place and leave him here to wait for the others. Just when Rick wasn't sure anyone had survived, there was the distant roar of an engine. Daryl arrived, followed by Maggie's car, then T-Dog. It's great that most of them survived. Rick was the first to say hello to his best buddies. Lori finally got to meet her son. Hershel's 2 daughters were also alive, which was a blessing in disguise. Lori first asked where Shane was. Rick shook his head but didn't say how Shane died. Glenn looked around and saw that Andrea was not there. T-Dog said he saw her get jumped. Daryl immediately wanted to go back and look for her. Surely he couldn't leave her behind, but Rick stopped him. He thinks that after all this time, Andrea must not be at the farm. She's either escaped, or she's dead. There were too many zombies around, and they had to keep running for their lives. And with that, the group was on the run again. They didn't know that Andrea had survived, but there were still a dozen zombies behind her. Her pistol was empty of bullets. A zombie came in front of her, and Andrea was not afraid. She had grown into a female warrior, not waiting for her to rest and ready to start running away again. On the other hand, with the people fleeing the road, Rick's car ran out of gas, and another car could not squeeze so many people. Rick decided to spend the night nearby and look for gasoline in the morning to continue. The crowd was a bit helpless, with many complaints and grumbles. Rick could only stand up to lead the group and comfort them. He knew the situation was bad, but they had weathered the storm. At least they were not separated and would surely find shelter. Rick's words, "The others do not believe. There are zombies everywhere. Where is the shelter? Even if we find it, what can we do? The farm is still fallen." Rick, the leader, is too difficult. He can only change the subject and tell everyone to spend the night down that stone wall. But no matter what he said, there were always voices of disagreement. Daryl then remembered Randall, the guy Shane killed, but also turned into a zombie. Rick finally told the truth. The crowd looked at Rick in disbelief. He went on to say that when he was at the CDC, the doctor told him that everyone was a carrier of the virus and would turn into a zombie as soon as they died, and that being bitten by a zombie would exacerbate the death. The crowd was a bit overwhelmed and blamed Rick for not telling everyone earlier. Rick said to tell you, and what can you do? Let you more desperate? He just wanted to be left alone in the face of everyone's questions. Only his wife Lori came over and hugged Rick, and was just about to comfort him when Rick said flatly that he had killed Shane, because Shane wanted to kill Rick. He first killed Randall and then led Rick into the woods. He had planned all of this, and Rick had no choice then. Rick also gave him a chance to turn back, but he kept pushing Rick. Lori listened to Rick and let go of the hug in disbelief, then crouched on the ground and sobbed. Rick wanted to go up to comfort her, but she was thrown away. In her eyes, Rick is simply a demon. Looking at Lori's eyes, Rick's heart ached as if he should have let Shane kill him, as if Shane was her husband. She was outwardly calm, but her heart was dripping with blood. It was getting dark. Andrea had been on the run all day. She was too tired to run or kill anymore. Just as the zombie pounced on her, a sword shadow flashed and cut off the zombie's head. The one who saved her was a strange woman with 2 zombies chained behind her, and Rick and the others have already built a fire here. T-Dog was on sentry duty. Carol whispers to Daryl that it's not safe to follow Rick. Daryl said, "I have no problem with Rick." Then, he asked Carol what she wanted. Carol says she needs a noble leader. Daryl was puzzled. Wasn't Rick noble? Everything is done by himself. The group was now like birds of a feather, panicking at the slightest movement of the wind. Several women feel that they should not stay here, otherwise they are surrounded by zombies. Rick stopped them. The most taboo thing is to run unthinkingly now, and no one should go out on foot without a car. Maggie's heart is still not at ease. "Do not want to wait here to die," Rick said with a commanding tone this time. "No one is allowed to leave." Carol started complaining again. Rick got angry and said. The crowd looked at Rick and couldn't believe he had killed Shane. Rick told them about Shane's actions and how dangerous he was. Rick said people could go to the shelter on their own if they didn't think it was safe to be with him. Seeing no response, Rick said there was no democracy if anyone wanted to stay. This is the emotion that Rick has been suppressing for a long time lately. People want democracy in any decision they make. Some still want to say something, but at the same time they also want to rely on Rick. Lori still looks at Rick as if he had killed her father. It is really saddening, and not far from them, there is a city-like building towering. Remember to subscribe to my channel. The 2nd season ends, but I will continue to update you. We will see you in the next video.